Welcome, 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 and two more welcomes, one for the West Coast, one for the East Coast, part of our continuing series where we talk to reporters, writers, activists, anybody on the left, anybody on the right, especially professors, people who work in academics. We want to provide their opinion unedited and unaltered directly to you so that you could do this thing that was popular back when I was in high school called thinking for yourself. Maybe it'll come back, maybe it never will. With us, it's our privilege today to have Professor Daniel CHAND. He's a professor of political science, associate professor and graduate coordinator at Kent State University. Yes, that Kent State. Am I right about that? This is the Kent State? Okay, all right. And Daniel, I got to get this in. Third generation original roots from California, a little bit?
I'm actually from Texas, but
your family, though.
My grandfather, he did migrate from India, and he did live in California originally.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I had to get that in. I'm third gen Mexican. Okay, so we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes, as I like to call it. Professor CHAND works at Kent State University. Daniel E. CHAND, or Danny, received his PhD in public policy in the public management specialization at the University of Arkansas and has a master's in political science with an emphasis in community development from Illinois State University. His research focuses on nonprofits in the policy process and the implementation of immigration policy. His current projects include a nationwide survey of immigrant-serving organizations and the effects of punitive enforcement on immigrant and first-generation student school performance. Nice. He recently also began a historical examination of early East Indian immigration to the United States. Right on. He has published numerous articles in top policy and public administration journals examining topics such as the discretionary power of immigration customs enforcement, ICE, decision-making by immigration judges, and lobbying and campaign activities by nonprofits. He has also contributed op-ed outlets such as the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Prior to earning his PhD, he spent a number of years working with nonprofits in both development and advocacy projects. His experience ranged from state-level lobbying with nonprofit public interest law firms to working for political action committees. He also served as a Peace Corps volunteer in rural Zambia. Some of the work he's worked on is local implementation of U.S. federal immigration programs, immigration-serving organizations, local law enforcement, explaining ICE's image, an examination of public-private partnerships and immigration policy. I'll give it a second for the page to turn. Make sure I didn't miss something. Okay. Courses taught under the professor are research methods for political science, public policy analysis, law for public administrators, and more on public policy, seminars in money and politics. He also works on public policy and policy implementation, immigration policy, and nonprofit advocacy. Sorry, 1 second.
That's okay.
Internet something today. Some key appointments: Kent State University, Associate Professor of Political Science. Also worked at New Mexico State University, Associate Professor of Government. He has a PhD in public policy, specializing in policy management from the University of Arkansas, a master's in political science from Illinois, and a Bachelor of Science in Communication specialization in journalism from Beaumont. He's also part of our qualitative methods of social research at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And this is the book where I found him. We've already talked to Francis A. Benjamin and other people. We're trying to schedule a interview with William D. Schreckheis, and we have already talked to Stephen Stair, but this is the research, lobbyist views on civil discourse in U.S. state legislatures. Before we get to that, let's check in, see how we did. Professor, did I say anything wrong? Did I make a mistake? Do I need to correct something? Do we need to correct anything about your bio, Professor, at all?
No, all sounds 100% accurate.
Okay, all right. Let me ask you the standard questions I ask everybody. What is this project, Outside Looking In, Lobbyist Views on Civil Discourse in U.S. State Legislatures, and why is it important? Why were you part of it? Why did people even do this? Why bother looking at this book? Is this a relevant book? Is it something we should read, or is it totally irrelevant? Everything's fine, no problems, don't look at this at all. Which one, in your opinion, Professor?
Well, I'll certainly take the former.
I give loaded questions.
All the time and effort if it wasn't something worth publishing. No, so to give you just a little bit of background of how the larger project started, uh, Professor Nicholas Leverage, who is actually a bit of a legend in public administration, which is my field in political science. He was the person who started this. I kind of consider him to be my academic grandfather. My dissertation advisor, William Schreckheis, who I guess you're going to speak to a little bit later
We're
on.
trying. We're trying.
He actually was a student of Nick Leverage, and so I consider Bill Schreckheis to be my academic father and Nick Leverage to be my academic grandfather. But getting off the family academic family stuff, this was Nick's idea. This idea to look at the decline in civility, and I think we've all kind of recognized that there's been a decline of civility in political discourse, whether it's the discourse that we have online or even look in Congress now. You have members of the Republican Party who are openly calling each other names and going after each other. So this was Nick's idea, and he was particularly interested in seeing if this decline of civility is not only happening nationally, because we focus so much now, and I say we, I mean society, focuses so much on what happens in Washington, D.C., that we forget there's also 50 state governments, right? And most laws, most things that affect people come out of the states, not Washington, D.C. And so that was the edifice for this project.
So it's obviously polarization exists in Congress. We've seen it at the federal level. Everybody bought onto that. But some people in academia wanted to say, did it expand to the states? Is the cancer limited to just the brain, or is it expanded to all the different capillaries of the body? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think the polarization it's spreading to everywhere.
Okay.
And
Is that what you found? Is that what you found in the research? Was it has spread to the states, or is it just limited to the feds?
No, there's definitely vast agreement among the people that we surveyed, and our survey went out to state level lobbyists. So we thought to go to lobbyists because they have sort of an outsider's view of what's going on, but they are obviously there, and they they have a much better view of what's going on in state politics than most people would. And a lot of lobbyists, they've been around for decades. Even in some states, state legislatures like Ohio, where I live, you have term limits. So you go up to a current state representative who's maybe been there for 3 or 4 years, and you ask him, "Hey, how's it changed?" He may not, or they may not have much experience on which to base that on. They've only been there for a few years. But lobbyists who work at state level politics, they've been there for decades, right? And yeah, there's widespread agreement that polarization is happening everywhere, and it is in state politics, happening in local politics too now. And we see it with things like city council meetings that used to be somewhat boring and mundane, but now can become really raucous and quite contentious because of issues like mask mandates during COVID, or what's being taught in the local schools and stuff like that.
When did that happen, according to the research or your interpretation of the research? When did it spread to the states? I'm assuming it started at the feds first, not at the states. That I could be wrong. And when did it spread to the states? And when, in your opinion, did local politics, as you said, local politics now is polarized? When did we start to see? I understand you may not have an exact answer, but roughly for the audience, when do you you're not held to a polygraph, but roughly for the audience, when do you think it hit the states? Roughly when did we start to go, Oh, it's definitely hit my local school board now.
So this is not something that we were necessarily asking in that
Fair.
survey on civility. When did there become a decline in civility? There have been other researchers who look at political polarization as an issue. That obviously you read my bio. I do a lot on immigration and immigration enforcement. I was part of this because of my work in money and politics, and I do have a lot of experience on like researching lobbying and lobbyist stuff. So prefacing that, me quoting the researchers who look at political polarization, what we have right now, I should also specify the polarization we have right now. It's not like we've never been polarized before. If you go back to the Civil War, that was quite polarization, right? It was look at even during the Vietnam War, society was quite polarized. But what we're having right now, which is highly unusual, and some like myself would say is problematic, is that we have this extreme partisan polarization. So people are polarized across political identities, and that is quite unusual. If you look at even back in the Civil War, right, we generally think of Republicans were against slavery, and Democrats were for it, and the Democrats were in the South, Republicans were in the, but there were Republicans and Democrats everywhere, and there were Democrats in the North or in northern states that were actually against slavery. So it wasn't a partisan polarization, and that's what we're experiencing right now. So getting to your question, I think the people who study this have kind of honed in on sort of the 1990s as when we started drifting into this partisan polarization and more politics being kind of nationalized, starting kind of around the time of what was called back then the Republican Revolution, the Gingrich Revolution. Republicans took over in 1994 Congress. I don't know if you remember, or if you're people who follow your feed know that Democrats held Congress for well more than 40 years. And then in 1994, Republicans took over both houses of Congress shortly after Bill Clinton was elected. And there have been some excellent research. There's been some actually pretty good trade books too about that era. If you look online, there's a book called The Blue and the Red, and it describes how sort of this nationalization of politics starts in sort of the 1990s. We get more and more sort of partisan media like Fox News coming on. You see a rise in sort of like talk radio, and talk radio, which is all over the country now, mostly right-wing talk radio, but there are some leftist talk radios too. That's now it's spread to the internet. So I think if you're asking me, when did this sort of march toward polarization start? I think it starts in kind of the 90s, gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and then we are where we are today.
That's brilliant. So you win the prize. A lot of people have said the 1990s, but you've introduced me to a new book I haven't read before, so that's nice.
Yeah, the red and the blue. I think I got them backwards. I think I said the blue and the red, but that is.
Oh, we're definitely going to get that. Red and the blue, then 1990s. Okay. The 1990s birth of tribalism. That's what a lot of people have said, is that it started around this time. That's excellent. I didn't even know that was out. That's excellent. When do you feel it got to local governments?
Oh yeah, sorry, you asked that question. Let me.
No. I'm asking you somewhat outside your field, but in your personal opinion, if you don't have an academic background on this particular subject, then just as an American with two working eyeballs and working synapses, and somewhat a little bit of background on this, when did it roughly hit the local scene? Do you feel?
I think
there was no problems before Donald Trump. Everything was
down this entire time, but certainly by the time of Trump. Right, we're seeing more and more. So a lot of researchers, what they point to is sort of this nationalization of politics, and this is very much true. Bill Schreckeis and I actually published an article recently looking at immigration enforcement and how you can track ICE's enforcement, or ICE's enforcement actually is somewhat predicted by local political attitudes, right? So
Mm,
ICE enforces the law more aggressively in conservative areas than in progressive liberal areas.
right,
And
right.
that's that's a complicated thing. Why is that happening? Well, it's because local communities in many ways are responding to what's happening nationally, right? So in our field of immigration and immigration enforcement, you have what some people refer to as sanctuary communities. It's not a real
Yep.
thing, but basically what it is local communities that are creating policies to limit their enforcement, or sorry, limit their cooperation with ICE in enforcing immigration policy locally, right? That happens in the reverse, though, too, right? Now, with abortion or guns, you have local communities that are saying that with guns, they're not going to enforce federal gun laws,
Right.
right? So this is kind of happening this in response to national politics, and then all of a sudden that puts national politics issues and local in a local sphere where it didn't really used to be a thing. And when we look at even research, public opinion research now, when we ask people, well, who are you voting for mayor? Who are you voting for city council? And why? And what are the issues that are important to you? If you go back 20 years, people would say, if they're voting for president, they might say, well, I'm voting for, blah, blah on foreign policy or something. But if they were voting for city council, they say, well, I'm voting for this guy who's supporting local bond issue or blah, blah, blah. But now they say they vote for president and they vote for city council based on national issues like immigration or something like that, or guns or something that's highly partisan and polarizing. So.
I'd heard a theory that we used to have local news that was gutted. Now we have all these news stations just read their transcripts off the AP Newswire or whatever instructions they get from New York.
Exactly.
And that's basically decimated local reporting. They fired lots of local reporters. There's not much interest in local reporting. And then because you're feeding the national news feed through these local newspapers, now your local audience is just primed to read national news. They kind of get out of the habit of reading local news. And so we have almost no knowledge about what's going on in local communities anymore. And it's all national. Is that
That's
somewhat
exactly.
similar?
Oh, that's very accurate. And as someone who used to, or at least was an undergraduate journalism student, it's highly worrying, but it's exactly right. It's funny. My wife and I were just talking this morning about how the local newspaper when we were young used to be really thick, and now, the local newspaper is, if you see a physical newspaper, is really is super thin, and it's filled more with national news stuff because local newspapers just are going broke. They can't afford to hire reporters. A lot of that has to do with the birth of the internet, also, which
Right.
also is kind of from the 1990s.
Yep.
Are you there? Sorry.
Yep. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Did I freeze?
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there was you hit it again. That's a double winner. So 1990s, the big guess for a lot of people. A lot of people say Obama. More people say 1990. And then a few people aren't aware, but in the 1990s, we did have the internet. It was the birth of the internet. We didn't have social media, but there was a website called the Drudge Report.
Mm-hmm.
And the Drudge Report blog forced the entire national media to cover the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which they otherwise would not have. So you can go back to the 1990s and you can see internet traffic shifting the national conversation in a different way. That's an early example. That's way before social media, but the power of the net to do that was already there.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the power of the internet also ends up taking away resources from local newspapers, because newspapers lose advertising, they lose readership, and so there's less and less local reporting, and people just fill that with just national news, because that's what's easily reported and that's what's going to get reported in, the big networks. So.
And that makes us all polarized then. So we don't ever talk about local community things. We're only all talking about national politics, which is very polarized all the time. Let me ask you about the survey. So they said received over 1,200 completed mail and online surveys of professional lobbyists throughout 2018 and 2019 under a grant from the National Institute for Civil Discourse. In Outside Looking In, scholars from across the country interpret the survey results using a variety of lenses. They present unique perspectives on civil discourse in state legislatures, revealing both regional and national insights, the effects of political culture, heritage on perceptions of civil discourse phenomena, sentiments about civil discourse, multivariate cross-state comparison of the relative impact of political culture, presumed and actual impacts on term limits, on civility, comparison of lobbyists with and without prior legislative service, effects of rural-urban divide. What did you find about the effects of rural-urban divide, or was that not in your area in this book?
No, the chapter of that I ended up working on was the term limits chapter. So here in the state of Ohio, we have term limits, and don't put me on the spot. I can't think of all the states.
That's fine. I'll ask you a different question. So, just for everybody to know, this is the survey that went out for this. This is the book. This is a little bit about the book. It's a totally different book. There's the people who wrote this book. And then here's the survey that went out. If you're a registered lobbyist and we want to do an interview with you, this is part of National Institute for Civil Discourse, presented by University of Arizona, Washington, Kansas, Utah, Kent State, Boise, Oregon, Bradley. A bunch of universities came together on this. It's really good work. The WPSA paper presents an overview of a recently published book on civil discourse in the 50 U.S. states legislatures, culmination of 3 years of active collaboration amongst a dozen political scientists located at 10 universities spread across the U.S., looking at a national survey. They tried to answer two basic questions. Is the same breakdown in the ability to reach bipartisan agreements and demonstrate comity and civility in the discussion of potentially divisive topics taking place in their own home states? To the extent civility is breaking down in their own home states, what are the causes of this weakening of norms, customs, and traditions undergirding civil discourse? I think you're saying, Professor, we are seeing breakdowns in civility, and at least a major push is the lack of local news, and everybody just consumes national news. Is that fair, or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, I think it's everything has kind of become more nationalized. I guess you could say that's the way I would describe it. And everyone, and it's sort of nationalized around a relatively small number of issues that tend to be hyper partisan. And by the way, a lot of these issues didn't used to be very partisan. I write about immigration. But it used to be the case, if you went back to the 1990s and before, where there were a lot of Republicans who were pro-immigration and more relaxed immigration rule, and a lot of Democrats that were quite the opposite, and lots of people in sort of the middle. But everything sort of kind of breaks along more of a left-right divide now.
I saw where they were pointing out when Al Gore came out with his famous documentary, A Inconvenient Truth, climate change wasn't politicized at that point. You actually had some conservatives and Republicans talking about the importance of climate change. It became politicized. But if you go back in the history, you can see, like you were saying, it wasn't always politicized. We used to have conservatives and liberals on both sides of the spectrum on immigration, and both sides of the spectrum on abortion, and both sides of the spectrum on climate change. And in the last 10 to 15 years, it's, like you said, it's a grouping of identity. It's different than the 1960s and Civil War. You have this identity, you must have these opinions on all these particular issues to be part of our group versus their group.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Pernicious is the word that I've heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a problem.
What is this map about, and why is it important?
So that map, which I had nothing to do with, but I do vaguely remember.
I'm sorry.
What they
Sorry.
did was they created a civility index based on the survey and the questions from the survey, and then they ranked states where based on what the respondents thought was the least and most civil state legislatures. So yeah, in the dark was the more civil, and then in the light colored it was the least.
I know we put the red lines over there to highlight that difference that you were saying. So if you look at the chart, there's a black line on the right, and that's the exact dividing line between least civil and more civil. And like you were saying, more civil is the dark greens. So if you look at the red lines, everything in the red lines is the light, and then everything outside of the red lines is the dark. Going off just that, it looks like over half of America, at least 60%, 70% of the landmass is not civil. Am I massively misinterpreting this? I mean, this does not look good to me. This looks like it's saying that it is in fact, a minority of states, less than half, who are actually civil. And when we look at this, it looks like the majority of America is not.
Yeah. Well, remember, this is based off the survey of the lobbyists looking at the state legislature. So
Sure.
what we were wondering was the state legislature, was
Sure.
the incivility in the state legislature.
Sure.
And I wouldn't, by the way, make the assumption that just because the states are dark green are more civil, that there's not a problem of incivility happening in those states. It's just compared to the other states, they're still doing better, kind of think of it like, if there's crime everywhere in states, some communities have a lot less and some have more, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist everywhere. Yeah, but I would say yes, it certainly. And again, I didn't make that map, and I don't remember how they made that index. I actually was one of the authors of the survey, but it's been a few years, so I don't remember what questions they pulled to make that.
That's
index.
what I was going to ask. Like, let me see if I can find it. I didn't ask. I didn't pull down the questions. I just pulled down the introduction. But it levels of civility. It seemed, name calling, inability to work with each other, not taking phone calls, not calling the other person, having no meetings with them.
I would talk when you get to Bill. Ask him about the index. He's done way more work with the project than me. He and I were the primary people who first made the survey. But after I made the survey, I haven't touched it since. And in fact, I think he was the one that made that index.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really appreciate you being willing to take all the questions. We'll go to a more general one then. You're an American. You live in America. You have 2 eyeballs. You have working synapses. How bad does this bother you? You've also studied this, but you've also traveled around the country. Does this keep you up at night, or do you think, we went through the 1960s, it'll be fine?
Yeah, that's a good question. This hyperpolarization, it bothers me. It worries me a lot. It worries me a lot because if people are sorting based on sort of just broad ideology, right? And we see this. We know that this is happening. This is a fact. It's not an opinion, right? That people are sorting more on partisan identity than ever before. It causes a lot of problems, and our institutions weren't really designed to handle that. So I can give you some examples if you want.
Yes.
If we think back to when Trump was in office, Trump did all sorts of things that were just highly unethical. I mean, it's hard to remember, but within his first few months of it coming into office, he fired the FBI director and then went on national television and said it was because he wanted to get rid of an investigation, right? So that alone in the past would probably have been enough to start impeachment hearings, but Republicans didn't do anything about it. And that ended up probably being not even in the top 10 of all the things, you know, the rules and laws that he broke and stuff like that. Well, part of the reason why is that there's a partisan incentive to stick with your guy, right? And you know, we think that the Constitution was brilliant, and you know, the founders designed all these checks and balances, and it was smart in many ways. Don't get me wrong, but those checks and balances don't work as well if everything comes down to partisanship. You know, when Nixon, committed all the unethical actions that he did in trying to cover up Watergate, a significant number of Republicans turned on him, and he would have been impeached, and he would have been removed. There was an impeachment vote in the Judiciary Committee in the House, and a significant number of Republicans voted to impeach him, and a significant number in the Senate had expressed interest in removing him. Right, so you know, but that was a time of less partisan polarization. Right. There were more and more people. There were plenty of people who voted for Nixon, but then also voted for a Democrat for governor, or maybe a Democrat for their House race. Now people just are increasingly just, I either vote Republican or I vote Democrat. And if that's the case, if you see yourself as 100% a Republican on everything, on abortion, on guns, on taxes, on healthcare, on everything, on just identity, you identify like your identity is republicanism, you're much less likely to hold your side accountable,
right?
It is a tribalism, right?
Does the tribalism exist on the left, or is it just on the right?
Yeah, it does. I would say it's right now. What's very scary on the right is that I think the right, and again, I'm swinging a little bit outside my strike zone on this, right? Like,
that's fine. This is not based upon your data. This is you as an American living here with the rest of us. Personal observations, not data, but it's still valuable because you do exist and you have lived here. What did you see?
Yeah, I would say yes. The problem is more so on the right, and I would say big reason why is that the sort of fringe of on the political right within the Republican Party has had a lot more success at achieving the leadership of the party. So like perfect example is that Donald Trump was the nominee in 2016 and then ultimately won the election. But yeah, there's absolutely a tribalism that's happening on the left. I think the left is also a far more diffuse movement.
I've heard that.
Yeah, they don't. They tend to be more of a collection of issues that fall under a bigger umbrella, whereas the political right, they coalesce far better. And it's always been the case, at least as far back as we've been able to like map voting, that or map where people stand on issues. It's always been the case that members of Congress on the political right tend to cluster more in how they vote. They tend to have more unity in their agreement. Not always. I mean, not absolutely, but yeah, they tend to have more agreement than people on the political left.
Sure. Have you heard of the Durham report?
No, I have not.
So the Durham report is on the Federal Justice Department's website right now. I have to point that out because some people doubt me. It's an official federal case on the U.S. Federal Department Justice website, official case on their site. What it was is they looked into the Steele dossier. Do you know about the Steele dossier? Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump, and she said, I got this document by all these people we put it together, and Trump is colluding with Russia, and I got it. And she gave it to the FBI, and then the FBI improperly used the FISA federal warrant process and started the investigation on Trump. The Durham report, which is on the Federal Justice Department's official website under President Joe Biden, says she lied. She lied to the FBI.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
They did not use the FISA process correctly. I have trouble even getting any liberals to be aware that that happened and that she was found guilty. Is that a good sign for America?
I know vaguely what you're referring to about the
Sure. But we're talking about tribalism on the right, and certainly I agree. And certainly the thing that bothered me was when I saw people storming the Capitol on January 6th, and then I saw the Republican Party repudiate it, and then I saw them walk back their repudiation. That scared the hell out of me. I thought, wow, that is a cultish behavior. You stormed the Capitol, that's bad for democracy, and then you walked back your condemnation of it? And then, the stop the steal with the Republicans. That's a lie. Biden won, but he got all these people to say stop the steal. But then I look at the left and I go, for years, you said Donald Trump colluded with Russia. There's been 4 federal investigations. Not true. Never found evidence of that. And you could say, oh, he had underlings and he's a corrupt person, and he's a bad person, and he's a racist. I say that every other day. But they never proved collusion.
Yeah.
And then they said Hillary straight up lied.
So I think you're using this as maybe not the best example to show tribalism on the political left. I think if you want me to say that there's tribalism on the political left, yeah, absolutely.
I don't want you to say anything. I just want to see.
I agree.
We clearly have examples on the right, but when you lied to the FBI, you abused the process, you got investigations going which were based upon nothing, you wasted millions of dollars of taxpayer money.
Well, I wouldn't have said the Russia investigation was based on nothing. It was based on real things.
3 of them disproved that there was collusion. So there's no evidence there was collusion. We've investigated.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to get into that as the issue.
Sure. Sure. Let's do it. Why is it okay to believe that there was Russia collusion when there's 3 to 4 federal investigations and all of them have?
So the investigation was about Russian interference in the election. And
they said collusion.
The broader investigation was about Russian interference in the election, and there was very much interference in the election.
Sure, absolutely.
And I mean, the Russian government was behind it. They can prove it, they show it. And lots of people were indicted. Most of these foreign nationals will never get prosecuted because, they're not going to come to the United States. But yeah, that's a slam. They happened. Now, you're saying the word collusion. You're saying the word collusion.
Yeah.
There's no such crime as collusion.
Oh.
You can't be convicted of collusion. That's not a crime or anything like that. Right. So that's not really what they were investigating. And I know that the Republic, I know that Trump has repeatedly said, oh, there's no collusion, no collusion, no collusion.
So that's not what really, so the reports weren't really about investigating collusion.
Well, there were investigations into whether members of the Trump campaign were trying to help out these nefarious activities that the Russian government was doing. And on that, the Mueller report concluded that there was no evidence that they were trying to break the law, or the Trump campaign was trying to participate in the break the law. Now, the second half of the Mueller report did say that, we found these 11 incidents that he identifies as obstruction of justice.
Sure.
Like firing the FBI director and all
Sure.
this.
Absolutely. Totally agree with all that. Bad man, corrupt, racist, bad. I specifically remember multiple people in Washington and every single liberal news station saying collusion. We're going to prove that he actually colluded consciously with the Russian government to overturn the election. It was all over the TV.
Well,
there's no evidence.
I would ask them about it, just like you're asking me. I mean, I didn't say that Trump colluded. I don't remember any specific person. I mean, I'm sure there were people that were saying it and stuff like that, but I can't speak for every person out there.
Fair enough. Generally, you feel that the reports were about finding if he was guilty of dirty tricks, which they did. They found out that he was involved in a lot of bad business dealings, and he had asked the Russian government.
No, there's different investigations. And,
Yeah.
The Mueller investigation didn't look into his business dealings and stuff like that. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would prefer not to, because this is like a whole different can of worms. So
I was only bringing it up to show that in my impression, there was a lot of statements saying he colluded with Russia. We will prove it. I was in California. That's what everybody was saying for 2 to 3 years. And then it turned out to not be true. And then you had Bill Maher on Bill Maher's television. They had somebody go on his show and say there was no evidence of Russia collusion, and he started arguing with him. And it's questionable. Like, does that not?
It's not. Again, it's not a. It's a very vague thing. What you're saying is Russian collusion.
Sure.
How do you define collusion? Again, there's no crime of collusion.
Okay.
There's
if
not.
We're getting into the weeds, but I mean, if he consciously said, Vladimir Putin, I'm on the phone with you, I'm going to work with you to rig an election to destroy America, that wouldn't bring up treason charges?
Well, that would be a crime, but then you would have to show what it is he's doing.
Sure.
Like you would have to, like if for example, Vladimir Putin gave $1 million to the Trump campaign, that's illegal. You can't, I teach about campaign finance. You can't take money from foreign nationals, especially a foreign government, the head of a foreign government, right? So that would be illegal. Some people might go, oh, well, that's collusion. And I guess that would be right. But again, there's no legal term collusion or foreign collusion. Okay. Now, were there activities between the Trump campaign and the Russian government? There were some. They did find some. Is that collusion? Some people might call that collusion. I mean, Paul Manafort, who had all sorts of ties to the Russian government and pro-Russian oligarchs in Ukraine, Manafort's very pro-Russia. But put aside whether that's a good thing or not. But Paul Manafort met with members of the Russian government. He gave them internal polling from the Trump campaign. Is that collusion? Some people might call it collusion. It's not a crime. No, it's not a crime. That's the thing. There's no crime of collusion. So
okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I feel like we're way off on
we are. Again, I just brought up a point. You want to have a discussion, we can go into it. I will point out though that if you type Trump collusion with Russian government, you can see AP News, Cato Institute, Center for American Progress, Politico, NBC News, and the Washington Post all talking about collusion with Donald Trump and Russia. I'll leave it there now. Does the situation, political polarization, get better? Are we going to naturally heal, have a kumbaya moment, everybody comes together? Or
no, I don't think so. Not anytime soon. My recommendation, if you really want to solve this issue, is that and someone you may want to reach out to and talk to is a guy named Lee Drutman.
Yes.
He was a political scientist who's far more famous than me, who's recently written a book called The Two-Party Doom Loop. And, the only way I think we get out of all this is if we could somehow move to a multi-party system, and that would require changing how we do elections in this country.
Multi-party system with ranked choice voting?
So a lot of people, So a lot of people go straight to ranked choice voting. I think ranked choice voting is nice. It's like a Band-Aid, but that's not going to alone get us to a multi-party system. What we teach about in like American Government 101 is the distinction between a winner-take-all system, or typically what we call a single-member district plurality system, and say a proportional representation system. So countries that have proportional representation, they tend to have multi-parties, right? And that's because it's not a winner-take-all. it's not the one who gets the most votes automatically gets elected to office. What happens is people vote, and then if Party A gets 30% of the vote, then they get approximately 30% of the seats from that area or district. Right.
One of the conversations I have with a lot of professors in this space is that almost every democracy in the world doesn't do democracy the way that we do. They have a multi-party system like you're suggesting, something like ranked choice vote, and we have what they call the winner-take-all system.
Mm-hmm.
I won. I got 51% of the vote. I don't care what 49% of you say. And in a lot of the other governments, you have to have a coalition government of multiple parties coming together to get over 60%. And we don't do that.
Yeah.
And
I would say it's even worse than what you described, because you don't have to get, you don't have to get 51%. You just need a plurality, right? So even if you look at, like, if there's 3 people in a race,
right,
and someone gets 40%, but the other 2 get 30, right? The majority of the people didn't want that person, but that person got the plurality, and that's incentivized people. And I would say again, it's particularly bad right now on the political right. Incentivize people to know all I have to do is rally my base. All I have to do is reach this number, and I don't need anything else. I don't need to find commonality beyond that. And when you have hyper partisan sorting, people are sorting strictly on left, right, and it's spreading across all sorts of issues, right? Then it's more and more easy for you to just go, okay, all I need is to get just that plurality, and I'm good.
So you can have somebody win 39% of the vote.
If there's 3 people or 4 people.
Right. And so we got a majority of the public didn't pick this person, but they won, and under our system and tough, and they don't have to make a coalition government. They just get to run the government. Whereas in other systems, most democracies, they have to have this coalition government, multi-party system. And when we in America overthrew the governments of Afghanistan and Iraq and established them as democracies, we didn't even set up our own system. We set up the multi-party system.
Mm-hmm.
How good is our system if no one in the world does it and we don't even follow it when we invade other countries?
Well, I don't know. That's maybe a question for someone like Lee Drutman to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that.
Is that a good look? You're like, hey, we're all about democracy. We set up systems that look nothing like our own.
Yeah. I mean, other countries do use winner take all. I think what's particularly difficult in our situation is we have a winner take all plus a presidency, plus we have this weird quirky electoral college thing. So it makes it more and more the case that you don't need to reach a broad commonality. You just need to sort of reach a bare minimum of the plurality, and then that's it. And so you can just say I don't care about what the rest of America thinks. I don't care what
I remember George W. Bush won 51%. He goes, I have a mandate from the American people. And I go, on 1%?
Yeah.
You have a mandate on 1%. Okay. Last 2 questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being willing to answer a variety of questions. It really helps the public to understand. If we don't implement proportional representation, which is the best solution to save us from political polarization, how much worse does it get?
Oh, well, I mean, don't quote me saying proportional.
I'm not quoting you as a professor, as an American, 2 working eyeballs.
Solution, but
living here in this cauldron with the rest of us.
Yeah,
it's not going to get any worse. It's fine. We blew off steam.
Oh no, things will get worse.
On it.
Things will get worse. Things will get worse. Things will get worse. How much worse? I don't know.
That's scary. Thank you for being honest. Last question. You're not you. You're not me. You're a third-party person watching this interview. And they said, wow, they covered a lot. I really learned a lot. I was really pleased that they went into all these areas and they got a good idea. But there was so much material, and they're struggling to remember it all. But it's 5 days after they've watched this interview, and they keep saying to themselves, I'm struggling to remember it all, but there was this one thing that the professor said, and it's 5 days after watching that video, and I can't get that out of my head. What is that one thought, Professor?
It's the one thought. I don't know. If you're worried about partisan polarization, I would say support any local efforts to do things like electoral reform. I think ranked choice voting is a step in the right direction. It's not a panacea. It's not going to solve everything, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Proportional representation. The likelihood that I get told all the time, that's not going to happen. It's highly unlikely, but I don't really see other solutions. So yeah, educating more people about proportional representation and trying to develop a multi-party system in the United States. I think that's something we can do, I guess.
Didn't that get passed in Alaska? I know
Ranked choice voting did. Yeah. They do have ranked choice voting in Alaska. They have it in Maine too. And so it's not proportional representation now, mind you. I mean, we'd have to really overhaul our system. But yeah, ranked choice voting is a step in the right direction. So can I ask you what? So did you spoke with Ben before this?
I spoke with. I did an interview with Francis A. Benjamin recently.
Yeah. Okay.
I spoke with Luke Fowler. We're going to try to get an interview with him, and we're going to try to get an interview with William D. Schreckheis. And I was able to get one or two questions answered from Stephen Stair, or I did a full interview with him.
What is the final project here? What is this?
Well, largely it's a labor of love. So the way that this got started was I was Marjorie Taylor Greene had her famous tweet on President's Day, red and blue can't live together anymore. We have to have a national divorce. So I said, after January 6th, I think that's maybe not a crazy idea. But she was largely derided by the public for even saying that in the press. So I looked into it and I said, well, maybe there's somebody who did a holistic review of this topic. I mean, even if you're saying she's wrong, let's have some real thoughtful review of this. And I could only find one article, and it was by NPR, and they interviewed 3 professors, all from coastal universities, and they concluded that it was largely social media and the Republican Party's fault. And they said, okay, we're done. And I go, you didn't interview any Midwest. You didn't interview any conservatives. You didn't interview a variety of people. You interviewed a couple, 3, who all basically agree and said, it's Facebook, Twitter, and all the Republicans' fault. And I go, that's it. There's nothing to it. You don't talk about the 1990s. You don't talk about polarization going back to there. You don't talk about Newt Gingrich's reform. No discussion on any of that. You can't even hear him mention the big sword of Gingrich. And I go, that doesn't seem thorough. So I thought maybe others would do a good job. They didn't. It was just a lot of, there's no real division. Marjorie's talking nonsense. And what really infuriated me was that I saw Anna Kasparian on the Young Turks and Crystal Ball on Breaking Points, which are fairly progressive news stations. And they had both reported on the level of political polarization in America before. The day after Marjorie Taylor Greene says political polarization is so bad, we need a national divorce, they both have shows saying there's no evidence of political polarization at all. They straight up lied, and they acted like they never reported on it just months prior. Then I saw Jack Probasek, who's an alt-right hardcore guy, talk about how MSNBC, the most liberal television station in the world, got it right when they criticized Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I go, that is some weird, bizarre behavior. Multiple newscasters forgetting reports they made, alt-right conservatives saluting alt-left people, all of them coming to the idea of there's no division, you don't need to talk about this, everything's fine. And I go, that's total garbage. I don't know what's going on, but somebody should be doing their job and nobody was. I waited another month, nothing ever happened. So I used my contacts that I had. I had worked in activism for 10 years, and I had met a few professors. This started off with F.H. Buckley, who wrote a book on political division. He's a professor out of law on the East Coast, and he worked in Canada, and he wrote a few speeches.
Sorry if I interrupted. But is it like is the goal to like produce like a podcast or something like that? Or
the idea is to get as many interviews as I can and provide them unedited to the public. That's basically it, because I don't see anybody doing that. I don't see anybody interviewing different professors and saying, what do you think? I don't care. My opinion doesn't matter. How do you see it? Unedited and uncut and just going directly to the public. I've done over 100 now. I was very pleased 2 weeks ago to see the Washington Post mention that they're going to do a project that looks exactly like mine. 6 months after I started. They're finally getting the idea.
How are you going to provide them, like on YouTube or?
Yeah, it's on my channel. I'll send you a link to this video. Not right after, but like an hour or two. Yeah. And that's basically it. I put them on my own personal YouTube channel. And then when I ask professors for interviews, I'll send, like when I sent the invitation to you, I'll include previous interviews so that you can see other interviews, because it's about trust. It's like, I don't want anybody thinking I do gotcha journalism or anything like that. So the only way I could do that was to say, hey, all the interviews are live, so I can't edit them or tamper with them. That's how I got my first 20 professors. Then I took the list and started showing it to other people, just going, look, it's not gotcha journalism. It's whatever you think is going to get put out there the way you want it to be. And every time I send that list, it gets longer. And so new professors I'm trying to invite watch the old professors' videos. And I've noticed I've started to slowly help start a national conversation by putting other professors' opinions in front of other professors. And I've heard from a couple professors that I'm the only one doing this. This is the only project of its kind, and keep going because America needs it. So the idea is just get it out there unedited.
No, I have not. I haven't seen anything like it before. Well, I wish you luck, and
thank you.
Good talking to you. And hopefully you kind of find maybe a consensus on how we break out of this. So
a lot of people have said what you said straight up. Started in the 1990s. I loved hearing that because I'm in California, and all we talked about was America was perfect, and then Donald Trump came, and he himself by himself broke the whole thing. And we lived in a perfect exactly. Okay, but exactly. But I had to hear this for 4 years. Just everything worked before him. We sang Kumbaya and skipped and chewed bubblegum together, and everyone loved each other. And I'm like, what universe? Because I went to the Iraq war protests against George W. Bush. People were mad.
It was there. It was bubbling. I think it's certainly gotten worse. But Trump was a symptom of it, a very bad symptom of it.
Thank you.
I mean,
I was told he couldn't have
happened if the conditions weren't already in place.
And that's partly why I started doing this. Was I was going mad hearing it's all Trump, it's all Trump, it's all Trump. Just get rid of Trump, just imprison Trump, and everything snaps back together. I'm going, you're assuming we never had any problems before. The Tea Party never had fights with Obama. They didn't shut down the government a couple of times. We didn't have political polarization at the levels where we lost our AAA credit rating for the first time since 1945. People didn't fill up the streets hating George W. Bush. None of that was mentioned during Trump. Not in Cali, not in most of the newspapers. It was
people tend to have short memories.
And that's why I did this. So I go, look, don't listen to me. Don't care what my opinion is. I'm going to go interview as many different people who've actually studied this and ask them, is it a problem? Did it start with Trump? And how do we get out of here? And what I've gotten is, hell no, it didn't start with Trump. It started way before him. He's a symptom of problems that have been brewing and boiling for a long time. We are partly the problem, us, the American people. And the way that we get out of this is by having these conversations to discuss solutions. Because one of the things that I found dismaying was when I looked into the research, there's no agreement amongst anybody who studies political polarization on the solution.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find it.
Gerrymandering, primaries, social media, lack of dominance in Congress, get rid of Trump. It's across the board.
Yeah, I think so. You've rattled off a lot of, I think, what are sort of incremental solving, but I don't think there's a single solution. Yeah, but
I was hoping to find one. I was hoping as a novelist. Well, you okay, get it out, get it. This is I love professors. I love professors. You guys are so awesome. You really provide all this great knowledge that we know, and you do it for free because that's what your job is. But I noticed that professors are willing to stay to just what they can prove, and they're willing to stay in debate with others for a long time. There's a debate between Abramowitz and Fiorina on if the people themselves are polarized that's been going on the better part of a decade. And I was hoping as an ignorant outsider, very ignorant outsider novice, that when I peeked into your world, I was going to find you guys already came to a solution and you already agreed and you've agreed for years. It's just the public doesn't know about it. And then I was going to go, oh, great, I'll help you get it out to the public. And then America can be fixed. And what I found is a lot of really smart people with really good data having different opinions.
Yeah. Well, problems are problems in part because they're complicated. If they weren't, then
I wanted you guys to make the world simple for me.
Yeah. But hey, it was very good talking to you. Good luck with your project. Yeah, please do send me the link to your
Absolutely, sir.
page.
Absolutely. And
all right.
Thank you so much for coming out. I'll send you a copy soon. And thank you for your time.
Have a good one.